Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Beit Midrash. Hope y'all are doing well. If you want a geology lesson on the splitting of Yam Suf, you can talk to Barbara. I'm pointing to her on my screen. I don't know if it's I might be pointing to complete nothingness for anybody else watching this, but on my screen, I'm pointing to Barbara, and she can give you a geology lesson on it. Which she laments that Rabbi Sacks does not address in any way, shape, or form. But if we do have any feedback on Rabbi Sacks' commentary, if you want to know, you can talk to Barbara. If you have any feedback on Rabbi Sacks' commentary.
Well, one of his points was that they took the long way around, not because the water was more shallow, but because first of all, psychologically, they needed to, they were slaves, they had a slave mentality and they weren't ready. But also he makes the point that if you want to do something important or well, that you have to do it for a while. You have, who does he quote? They have to do something 70, that Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah. Anders Ericsson. Also, he says it's Anders Ericsson who Malcolm Gladwell quotes.
Right. And yesterday being Tu B'Shvat, we also learned that from trees that you have to wait till the fourth year. It takes patience. If you certain crops when you plant, you don't get them the first year. You have to wait. And I was just wondering, is there any connection between the fact that these holidays come at the same time, or that this Parsha is read, or is it just a coincidence this year that it's read at Tu B'Shvat?
An interesting question. I'd have to go back and look to see if Tu B'Shvat usually falls in Parshat B'Shalach. I mean, theoretically, it should. I don't think I've seen a lot of commentary on it. Though you do get some connections in the course of the Parsha. You get what you just mentioned, which is a really nice drash in and of itself, that we have to, for in an agricultural society, which I don't think we're in anymore necessarily. You plant your seeds and they don't grow right away. You got to wait for them, and then you got to wait for them to mature, and you got to wait for the fruit to ripen. And if it's a tree, you got to wait 4 years in the land of Israel before you can eat of the fruit. So that it's not a,
instant gratification.
Thank you. That was the term I couldn't think of. It's not an instant gratification society. It's a society of patience and waiting for things to come. But elsewhere in the Parsha, you have, Moses providing them water. Well, that's, trees are important for that, for water supplies. You get the manna coming from heaven. And while it's very explicitly not from a tree, in the Torah, are important for food production, and you need food. So, there is some interesting parallels that I hadn't thought about between the two.
Well, but typically what you read about, I think it's Muslim philosophy and other philosophies, Chinese philosophy, is that they look at the long term. I'm talking about not a month, a year, but 50 years, 100 years, even longer. And I haven't thought of Judaism being that type of philosophy. So how are we interpreting that correctly?
Well, when you say that they're waiting 100 years or longer, they're waiting 100 years or longer for what?
To accomplish what they want to accomplish, which might be to push the Jews, out of Israel, for Israel to, whatever their goal is, that they have a much longer range of patience for accomplishing their goals.
Yes, I mean, look, Jews were sitting there praying for a return to Israel for 1900 years, give or take a couple decades. Um, we've been waiting, thousands of years for the Mashiach to come, the Messiah. So, I mean, we there's kind of we build for today to create a better tomorrow, so that at least particularly the way I think of it, we don't think of it as we're going to accomplish our goals at any point. We rather think of it as we're building towards those goals throughout our lives and setting the stage so that people after us can continue building beyond us. And I think that's how Judaism often looks at it. To quote Rabbi Tarfon in Pirkei Avot, who gets quoted all the time, including by me, it is not upon you to finish the task, but neither are you free to desist from it. We're not expected to finish the goal of perfecting the world or making the world the best place it can possibly be, but that doesn't mean we stop trying because we're not going to finish it. Does that answer your question? Other comments, thoughts on Rabbi Sacks? What do you think of this idea that you're not going to there is no easy way to do things? TK?
Oh, as I was reading that, what popped into my mind was the phrase, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger," which is something I hear a lot, and it's the same kind of mindset that it makes us stronger when we don't get something right away and we have to work for it. I looked that up because, it popped in my head, but I didn't know who said it originally. So I looked, and it seems to be Friedrich Nietzsche, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh dear, I can't bring that up because I kind of associate him with the Nazis. But then I read a little bit about him, and that's actually not true. He was not anti-Semitic. He was kind of anti-religion in general, but he wasn't specific. He wasn't anti-Semitic. His sister, however, was, and his sister promoted him to the Nazis. So, for whatever little side comment that is worth, I've certainly found in writing that it takes at least 10,000 hours or more, wherever that number came from.
Nietzsche was he was a nihilist, and I wouldn't expect him to say anything that positive.
Yeah, it surprised me too. I didn't know where it came from.
Where this chapter really took me was, I think a lot about kids, my kids and their generation.
Yes.
My wife, as a teacher, has been called more Alexa more than once, because they're just so used. They have a question, Alexa, tell me the answer to the question. Like, it's like right now they just want the answer. And we've had this conversation with our son. He's like, what's blah blah blah? Like, I'll ask like a math question, like, what's 123 times 52? Do the math. Well, I don't want to do the math. I just want you to tell me the answer. Well, I'm not going to do that. Not least because I can't do that in my head. But you want the answer, do the work to find the answer. We're not just going to tell you the answer. That's not how life generally works. At least, that's the way I was raised. You got to do the work to get there. And, there's no, and that's kind of the lesson, right? There's no shortcut. You can't just, say, tell me the answer, and you know,
If you
that's
have a
not always going to-
smartphone, you don't have to do the math.
That's
What was that,
right.
Suzanne?
I said, if you have a smartphone, you don't have to do the math.
Well, he doesn't have a smartphone. He does have a calculator, and I say, like, if it's too hard
Same.
to do in your head, punch it into a calculator. There's nothing wrong with that either. So I did once see like a funny little thing of like lies that they told you in elementary school, and one of them was like, you know, you have to learn how to do this. You're not always going to have a calculator in your pocket to do the for you. I'm like, yes, I do.
Yes, I do. Yeah. And it's going to get worse or better or something in the
Different.
future. We're going to have, I think we're going to have implants of connected to the internet in our heads.
Yeah.
In the future
And
We
they-
generation.
these are
almost
such a-
have an implant because we have our watches, our smart watches that do it.
It is, and we use our, you know, our mind is really augmented by that. So there's, you know, there's what we're saying, and what Rabbi Sacks said is important. There's some things that you have to learn by trying over and over and failing in order to really learn it on some deep level. But there are other things that we don't have to do that with now. And maybe that's not such a bad thing, because when we get our answer quickly, it does free us to go ask another question built on that information quickly.
Might
That
be
makes
bad
any
if you're
sense.
asleep.
If you're
We're
what?
not even talking about the issue of wisdom. I'm getting a quick answer with a calculator or something implanted in your brain is fine, but I don't think you can get around that it takes a long time to become wise. I would say, like in the doctor realm of things, in general, if you get somebody right out of medical school, they may know, you know, the genetics much more than a older physician. But I think if you have a significant medical problem, you should pick somebody who's got some experience and wisdom under their belt. So I would ask the rabbi, is that true in the rabbinic realm also? Because we acquired you after you had many years to develop your skills. Do you feel like you're wiser than you were, and you couldn't have become wiser without time and practice?
Oh, absolutely. But you know, I've made my share of mistakes as a rabbi over the last almost 10 years. And it's hard to believe I've been doing this for almost 10 years. But
it's a drop in the bucket.
yes, it just feels weird that it's been
Hopefully.
10 years. Like I don't feel like it's been 10 years already. I feel like I just started. So like the fact that I'm no longer like a young career rabbi, which they usually say is like under 5 years or under 7 years. I'm like a mid-career rabbi, just feels weird. That's all I'm saying. Like it just feels odd that I'm no longer like this new young rabbi. I'm old now. But like I look back on things that I did and things that I wrote. Like I keep records of things I wrote. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that was good. I don't know if I'd say that anymore, but it was good at the time. Like it was an interesting thought. It's just, nah, like I don't know if it's the same thing anymore. And there are things that, you know, I reflect on and I did, and I've learned along the way. Personally, like as a person, as a rabbi, that I'm just, you know, I've learned a lot in those 10 years just as a rabbi, not to mention, you know, the 5 years of rabbinical school before that, and, you know, the almost 30 years before that. But
How about you, Howard? When do you feel like you were at the top of your game from a wisdom standpoint? How long did it take you?
Right now.
Right, I'm just getting started. Yeah, that's what I tell my almost my great grandchildren pretty soon. No, I don't know. You know, there's certainly positive things about getting older and more mature. It's just experience. I mean, that's all it amounts to me, is that you know, well, I've seen that rash, or I've seen this pathology before. It's not my first time. So I know where I'm going. There's always a first time. So, I mean, experience pays off, but on the other hand, I think as you get older, you do lose some cognitive stuff, and you certainly lose some physical stuff. I mean, you don't want an 80-year-old surgeon operating on you, and he may be wonderful, but he's got a lot of experience, but he's not quite the same physical ability. So, you know, it's a trade-off stuff. I don't know if I've got any words of wisdom.
Are there any people who are precocious in their wisdom development? I mean, was he precociously wise? Was Abraham precociously wise? Is that why they were such good leaders?
How old were they? I'm not being able to pull that up.
So Moses at this point, at the point we are at in the Torah, is 80 years old.
Yeah, he's 80 now.
Abraham,
Abraham's 100 when he's
I mean,
having
Abraham
kids.
was 100 when he got circumcised, or circumcised himself rather.
But what
How old was he when he left?
when he started
That's a good
doing
question.
the
I can't think
idols,
of it off the top of my head.
when he broke his parents' idols, it sounds like he was
He was young.
he was young.
He was younger then.
Are we taking the age literally? Because I've read that
Yeah.
one way to look at that is that the ancients' sign of respect was to have people be a good bit older than they really were.
Plus there are certain numbers that are assigned.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that, you know, the Torah doesn't tell you he's 80 years old at this point. The only thing it tells you is that he died at 120. So you can kind of backtrack from there that he's 80 years old.
Right.
Now, was he actually 120? That's a different question. Is it a statement in that based off Genesis in which God says that's the limit of human life? But even going back to Stuart's question, I think even going back to that, Moses knows some things, but as it goes through the Torah, there are things to know, and he has to stand back and say, what do I do? I mean, when we get to next week's Parsha, one of the first things that happens is he goes to his father-in-law, and his father-in-law says, you can't keep doing this.
Right.
This is not the best way to do this. You can't. You're going to kill yourself trying to do it this way. So even Moses has things to learn as he goes. You know, one of my favorite little midrashim is that you know, the book of Deuteronomy is basically just Moses' soliloquy for about 30 chapters or so, or 28 chapters, something. And there's a great midrash in which the Israelites look at him and go, aren't you the one who said I'm heavy of tongue and can't talk? And now you won't stop talking. So Moses, throughout the Exodus, has a lot to learn. Abraham, even after he agrees to go with God, still has his doubts, still questions God, still challenges God. So I think that's why we idealize them and we look up to them, not because they were perfect at the moment, but because they continued growing, even as growing and learning and questioning, even after they took the positions that they did. And I think that's a beautiful lesson in and of itself. And Moses at 80 still has a lot to learn. Well, everybody can keep learning. Everybody has much to continue growing and learning. So we ideally will never stop.
So TK, you interviewed a lot of people for your book. What did you feel like any of them were precociously wise or precociously intelligent or what?
Just yesterday I interviewed J. Mason Davis, and he's working on. He would like to record some of his life, and that man learned how to read at age 3, which I know is not impossible, but he was just really, really brilliant, and his father worked with him to do that. And they upped him in grade, and he's not saying this, but I'm listening to him and talking to him, and I'm thinking, okay, my brother was like that, and he just about got thrown out of school because he kept showing up the teacher, and he had no social skills, but apparently Mason did. So I think he might have been quite wise at a young age. He was brilliant. He read all of the books that were, I forgot what he called them, books of the world or something. It was a precursor to Britannica.
The Book of Knowledge.
The book of
Book of Knowledge. Yeah, I think that's what it was called.
Yeah.
Susan, was that you that
Yes.
said that? You remember those?
I had the whole set.
Really? Wow. So what kind of, I'm just curious, what were they pitched to a younger grade level, or were they like our encyclopedia today?
It was like a younger, a little bit
Yeah.
younger, easier to understand than
Yeah.
it was, you're right,
It's an encyclopedia.
a kind of encyclopedia, but maybe a junior encyclopedia. But
Anyway, that's, other people, most people, I think we just have to muddle along and learn. And for example, I hated history in school. It was just boring to me, except I did like ancient history. I like, Greece and Rome and Egypt, but other history was just, who would have ever known I'd be, writing books about American history? No. So that's,
Even though Mason was so smart, he still needed mentors. I mean, I remember
yeah.
Carl Friedman helping him sort of get into the practice and become engaged in the legal community, even though he was African American.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
we all need
yes.
help.
I'll say, it's interesting as I was listening to you, I think Judaism has 3 words that each have a distinct meaning. There's chokhmah, da'at, and sechel. Da'at is like book smarts. It's like book knowledge. It's being well read, understanding facts, knowing what things are. Sechel is being able to apply that knowledge to real life. Like sechel is like, okay, like I know how physics works. Now I can actually like estimate how hard I'm supposed to throw a ball to get it to where I need to go. Chokhmah is wisdom. It's like the accumulated knowledge that we have from experience, and you can really only get it from living life. So there's a difference between those 3. Like my daughter was asking me, like, she has a chemistry quiz today. So she was like asking questions, and I'm like throwing things out that I vaguely remember from 25 years ago. And she's like, did you just make that up? I'm like, somewhere in the back of my mind, I know it. I have the dot of like some basic chemistry because I took it in high school and I remembered bits and pieces of it. Do I have the sechel? Do I have the ability to apply chemistry to my life? Not really, because I don't have that's a part that I never really worked on. Do I have chokhmah? Do I have wisdom from experience? Yeah. not as much as Howard or, but I have wisdom from experience because of what I've lived through in my life and what I've learned along the way. And that's all that, I think there's a distinction between those three is, I was never really taught to practically apply the chemistry knowledge I have because I didn't become a chemist. My grandfather, who was a chemist, probably had the sechel to do that. I'm assuming because he was a chemist. Just throwing that out there and that distinction between the different kinds of intellect.
I love that because in the book I'm writing now, I'm playing with that concept of words, the words in a language, the terms for things can indicate, like you said, wisdom, and it also indicates the ability to know the differences between things. For example, I guess the most famous thing that pops in my head is Eskimos, their term for snow and ice, they have, I don't know, 100 words for snow. And we in the South have snow, and that's about it. But having the language, and the Japanese have a word, for example, for the way that light filters through the leaves in a dappled pattern. They have a word for that, which means that that's something they see. And the fact that Judaism has different words for wisdom, I love that. And the Greeks, I think, have different words for love. And just knowing, just knowing that there are different words, there are different concepts for things. That in itself opens your eyes to learning something in a deeper way.
Can you write that in the chat, Rabbi?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask him, would you mind sharing those words?
Yeah. If you want to send it, guys, I can put it in the chat, or you can just send it to those who want it, can send it to me after, so I'm not too distracted.
You mean you're going to send it to us afterward?
Yeah.
I can if you would like.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
please.
Send it to the group.
Okay. I will do my best to do that.
But we'll remind you if you forget.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We won't let him forget.
Rabbi, I noticed that you quickly got one of them in. Chokhmah is wisdom, but Chokhmah is wisdom with experience. I know you didn't finish.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
Wisdom from experience.
Correct. And I think, circling back to our earlier conversation, I think that's a little bit.
Chokhmah is Hebrew. That's how I thought was Yiddish.
Sechel is also Hebrew.
It's also Hebrew?
Yeah. It
Okay.
kind of like Sechel in like Yiddish, but yes, like it comes from the Hebrew.
Yeah, I've heard it all my life, but
Yes.
Just as a Yiddish expression.
Yes.
Custom,
He doesn't have the sechel, right? He doesn't know how to apply his knowledge that he has.
When my father called me a chacham, that was not a positive.
That's like a little
a wise ass.
Eisenheimer.
So there's a little double entendre there because a chacham is like a rabbinic student also. It's like somebody who's like real, like a well-known rabbi who has learned for a long time. He's a chacham, and it's like a term of like a title of appreciation. Like he's a chacham. He's such a great rabbi. I remember this popped into my mind. I remember going to a synagogue in Israel when I was there, and they were calling the rabbi up for an aliyah, the rabbi of the congregation, and they're like Rabbeinu or Morenu, like our rabbi and our teacher, and he's sitting there going, it's like Baskil, with like the wise one and the knowledgeable one, and he's like Hagaon, like the genius, and he's like going on trying to see how many he can get out of her, calling him up. It was pretty funny. But circling back to our, what we were talking about before, and this is me showing my age of my concern of that younger generation, that I think because they are so used to that instant gratification, what happens when they fail? Like, do they just throw up their hands and give up because they're not used to that failure?
Exactly. Yes.
And that's how you learn. And that's, we try to teach our kids that. Ask me in 15, 20 years, I'll tell you how it went. But, that's an important lesson. And that's the whole, like, thinking back, like, it's a high holidays. That's the whole concept of tshuva, is that you should be berating yourself because you made mistakes in life, but the whole point of the high holidays is, let me look at all those mistakes I made in the last year so that I can do better this year. Let me learn from that, rather than, I'm awful, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad human being. Thank you, Alexander.
It's no good, terrible day.
Not that, like, I should be berating myself because I did these things wrong, but looking at it from, like, the spirit of, how can I learn from what I did in the past to make it so I don't keep repeating that mistake in the future? Like the same, like, as Rabbi Sacks opens the book, like, opens the chapter with, right? Like, I walked down, I fell into a hole, and it took me forever to get out. Second time, what was that? The second time I knew the hole was there. I walk down the same street and I pretend I don't see that hole that I already fell into, and I fall in again. I walk down the same street. I keep falling into the hole, but at least I can get out quicker. Fourth time, I walk around the hole. Fifth time, I go down a different street, right? Like, this is experience. This is how you learn, is by making those mistakes. And I think as a society, we kind of have gotten away from that a little bit. But this is what we need to do. We need to, science is predicated on failing experiments. Fail enough experiments, then you learn what didn't work, so you can keep tweaking the experiment to make it better. Though the LJCC had a great quote, if you didn't see it on their board, that the most exciting phrase in science is not eureka, it's that's funny. Which is really true, right? Like, it's like, I didn't expect that to happen. That's interesting. Let's look into that more. Barbara, you look like you were about to say something.
I was just going to say, that's the perfect scientific method. You got to try something and learn from it. So your quote was perfectly appropriate. As you're talking, though, about social media and Alexa and Siri, Rabbi Sacks has already given us his opinion on that, and he did it by era, I think. He's saying you really lose your free will by being stuck with that. And I don't think we talked about that with DK last week, but he's definitely against. In fact, I think where he talks about, he says that's what's so good about, or one of the things that's so good about Shabbat. It forces you to leave all those smartphone addictions and get away from it. And that is what we need to do. We need to try things, learn from them, and apply what we've learned and pass it. So there go the last 3 chapters of this book, all in one sentence.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit of a contrarian in that I also want to point out that those smartphones and all of those devices can also spur a lot of questions and research that that you might not do if you had to spend forever and forever and forever looking through things to find out, when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, if you can find that out right away, then you can ask some more questions and get some more answers. So I think, there's only one, I guess that's, okay, I've forgotten the 3 words that you've said already, but that certainly seems to enhance what it is, sechel, if not chachma.
Look, I never said it was entirely bad.
No, I know, but I'm
but
just,
like, yeah, I agree. Like, there are benefits. Like, I remember having to do research in a library and having to pour through multiple books trying to find the one little thing I was looking for that I can find a heck of a lot quicker than by Googling it. And hopefully Google doesn't charge me for, stating that using their name publicly. But yeah, there are benefits and there is speed. It's just there there needs to be a balance between the two also, right? Like, we still need to know how to do the work.
I'm not quarreling with that
and we need to know the theory, we need to know the background,
Yeah.
we need to know how things work. We can't just like look everything up and have the internet tell us everything. But how do we we have to find that balance in life between the two. Yes.
And find and also where you need to do the work and where you can just let the work, you don't need to do the work on everything. You need to pick out where you're going to do the work.
And when Rabbi wants to use Chat GPT to make his next Yom Kippur sermon, I think the stage of development right now, maybe it'll improve. I don't think this AI stuff has a lot of wisdom. I think, again, it can get facts, it can collate facts together. But I think when ChatGPT rolls out your sermon, I still think you need to look through it, some for accuracy, but also for wisdom.
So, that's one of the, that's a different rabbit hole, but that's one of the questions philosophers and computer scientists are kind of debating and trying to understand at this point is, how far can AI actually go? Can it actually develop a sense of chokhmah from experience? You could argue in some sense it does, because that's how it operates, is it keeps running the same thing and improving it. And the more you run the same thing, it'll keep working it, but and fine-tuning it. But will it ever develop like a true sense of wisdom from experience or not? Just for the record, I had Orly read over my sermons before the high holidays, and she started reading that sermon on Yom Kippur. And she said, "What the heck is this?" I'm like, "What?" She's like, "This doesn't even sound like you." And I'm like, "Just keep reading." And then she's like, "Oh, okay. That makes sense now." But it took her a minute, because because it didn't have that feeling of a human writing it. It had a very cold sense to it. Can AI develop that kind of human feeling? I don't know. That's
when
well
it develops consciousness.
Yeah. If you listen to enough sci-fi, then that's the concern, is that it would. But
I think it can learn that, but it's a very long road, and there won't be any easy way for it to happen, because sometimes the long road takes a long time, and that's the only way to get it. So,
well, thank you for tying that back to Rabbi Sacks.
that's not the first thing I wanted to say, but yeah, it's a long road. As when it came to testing in my classes, I learned really quickly, you have to ask questions that need an application. You can't ask a question that says, "Is granite green?" because that was too easy to look up. So anything that was simply a factual piece of information, didn't test the experience of what people had learned in class or the applications to make from that. And we'll probably get there at some point, because as it turns out, AI is going to start to become such a pervasive part of our lives that education will have to do something totally different.
Yeah, I mean,
Experience.
that's already at least in colleges and high schools, that's becoming an issue in that people are generating their finals and their essays, and you know,
That's why they have
teachers are
Turnitin.
trying to figure out how they can how to do it. And there's now AI checkers that you can run essays through to make sure it's not AI generated.
Yeah,
Um,
and AI is
which I'm
what's
guessing is
reading it.
probably an AI doing the checking of AI,
Yes,
but
yeah.
you know, that's
Yes.
I
Yeah,
don't
but
know. They had that
TK
at UAB last year, the year before, and it, eventually AI was able to surpass, so that the AI checkers were not really effective anymore. But at least, for my daughter's students, at least at the more elementary levels, the introductory courses and so on, and the kids use AI all the time. And at least for when she teaches the more advanced creative writing stuff, those kids are not interested in using AI. They're interested in doing their own work, but there's a huge problem if you want to be a policeman.
TK, can you use AI to help you finish your book? I mean, what is the best ending that your book could have?
It's an interesting question, because I actually had an issue with how to end this book, and I asked AI to give me some possible solutions to it, and it gives, it is way away from being able to actually do something, write its own book. I mean, it could, but you would probably throw it across the room. But what it does, and how I've learned to kind of interrelate to it, I don't use it except when I get stuck. And then I bounce something off of it, and it gives me like a list of possibilities. And that may angle my brain in a different direction, just reading those I might not use exactly what it said, but it opened up something. It's really very similar to bouncing something off a friend. I've had the experience of getting stuck in a plot and just complaining about it to a friend, and they make some statement that really isn't directly helpful, but it causes me to go off in another direction and find something different to do. It just is like a little spur. So if you give it a little bit of a background, I think people were resistant to people learning to use a keyboard because they were afraid we would forget how to write, and that there was some connection
Plato
with
didn't
writing.
want us to be able to. Plato didn't want us to be able to write because he thought learning writing would mess up the ability to think. Wasn't even a keyboard.
So that goes back even further. I didn't know that. That's
Just
very
a little
interesting.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted you to the oral skills, I guess. They were afraid you would lose that. So it's been an evolution of what, and we're always afraid that this is going to screw up a generation and the next thing. I think we will just keep learning, because that's what we do too, and we will keep building on that. But there was something else I wanted to say, and I wrote it down so I could listen instead of keeping it in my mind. I think this is one place that Judaism really excels, and that is to be able to take two completely disparate facts and meld it have it in your mind at the same time, and it's okay. And one of those is something we talked about this week and last week, which is about, this week we were talking about learning from failure, and that you have to fail in order to learn. Last week we were talking about, if you keep doing the same failure over and over again, you're building myelin sheaths around that pattern, and you're making a groove in a habit in your mind. And so those two things seem to be very different to me. And yet I think they're both, there's truth in both of them. And that's, you know, anyway, for what it's worth.
So what is the crucial difference to get it to be not a habit, but to be a learning experience?
Yeah. Oh, there is a very good question. And I was thinking about what Nietzsche said, and of course, then I'm going to exceptions. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, but not always. Think about a veteran coming back with PTSD. You know, is he stronger? Maybe eventually, if he gets over it, yes. But you know, so he kills himself. No, he didn't get stronger from that. So maybe we should change that sentence to, what doesn't kill us can make us stronger. And then we're back to free will and making choices. And the same for a failure. If you keep failing over and over again, but you make no attempt to figure out why, or look at it from a different angle, or learn something from it, it's going to just be a habit that you do over and over. You know, you keep marrying an abusive man over and over again, for example. If you never step back and look at your behavior and what you're doing, then you're not going to learn from it. So it's not, the failure itself doesn't teach us anything. It's being able to
The
step
choice
back from
to
it.
the choice to learn from it.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts? That's a good one to end. Well, thank you all for learning. I look forward to continuing the long journey to learning and educating ourselves and making those choices for ourselves as we continue our class together. I did a rough estimate of our class, of our schedule. I think next week we're going to start doubling up on some parshiot, so we can try to finish this book before the summer. So I will send that. I'll remind you guys. But if we want to start reading the next two, and we'll probably through pretty much until June, we'll probably try to get through two at a time, so we can try to finish. If we don't get through, we'll figure it out as we go. Don't worry. But thank you all for learning together. Kol hakavod, and learning with you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.